everyone, this is S.J. Thomason with Christian-Apologist.com. Rather recently, I appeared on Adam Friended's channel called The Think Club, and we discussed a lot about objective morality. He's an atheist, but he and I both agree that we have objective morality. We just disagree on the grounding of it. And so I thought I'd go ahead and make a video that would clarify my opinions on the grounding of it, since I wasn't able to get some of the points together that I've put together since. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And I'm also going to talk a little bit about moral foundations theory, which is a theory that was created by a person called Jonathan Haidt, who's a psychologist out of New York University Stern School of Business. I'm going to identify ways in which moral foundation theory is flawed. But prior to doing so, I'm going to offer the premises and the conclusion that I'm building my article about. 1. If humanity has universal objective moral values and obligations to do what's right, there must be a universal source of righteousness that transcends generations. 2. Humanity has universal objective moral values and obligations to do what's right. 3. It follows that there is a universal and transcendent source of righteousness, God. I define objective moral values as values about what's good or bad, while objective moral duties or obligations are essentially duties about what's right or wrong. Using the moral realism perspective, Hofstadter in 2017 further explained objectivity and morality. Quote, "Consider the claim that the earth revolves around the sun. This claim is true. It states a fact, and this truth or fact is fully independent of what any agent thinks or feels about it. Similarly, moral realists maintain that moral truths or facts are fully independent of the attitudes of any agent. Similarly, Street in 2006 argued there are objective stance-independent moral truths. Multiple global studies have provided support for premise 2. A sampling will follow. Dalsgaard, Peterson, and Seligman in 2005 examined the ancient texts from 8 religious traditions: Christianity, Judaism, Athenian philosophy, Taoism, Confucianism, Islam, and Hinduism. The authors found 6 recurrent values: courage, temperance, justice, transcendence, humanity, and wisdom. Other global studies have found similarly. In a survey using psychological, historical, juridical, theological, and ethnographical research, Westmark identified universals in the approval of honesty, charity, mutual aid, and generosity, along with the prohibition of theft and homicide. Henrich and colleagues in 2005 examined 15 societies, finding that fairness and trust were exhibited in all. In multiple studies of hundreds of samples in 82 countries and representing culturally diverse people of varying ages, genders, occupations, and geographies, Schwartz in 2012 drew a conclusion that he considered astonishing. After ranking 10 values in order of importance, results indicated universals in values. Benevolence was the number 1 value and most important value, followed by universalism and self-direction. Along similar lines, Kinnear, Kearns, and Douthribes in 2000 consulted the religious texts and sacred writings of 7 major world religions. They found 4 commonalities, and they also looked at atheism and humanism. 1, a commitment to something greater than oneself. 2, self-respect, but with humility, self-discipline, and acceptance of personal responsibility. 3, respect and caring for others, in other words, the golden rule. And 4, caring for other living things in the environment. Psychologists Haidt and Joseph in 2004 surveyed evolutionary theories about human and primate sociality, along with lists of virtues and taxonomies of morality, from psychology and anthropology to moral concerns or virtues that were shared widely across cultures. They established 5 foundations of morality: care harm, fairness reciprocity, in-group loyalty, authority, and purity sanctity. Graham, Haidt, and Nosek in 2009 identified political variations in the attention to the 5 foundations. People considered more liberal on the political spectrum were primarily concerned with care harm and fairness reciprocity, while more conservative individuals drew more evenly across all 5 foundations. So what grounds our objective moral values and duties? Jonathan Haidt often makes the claim that the 5 aforementioned values are the innate foundations or grounding of our morality. He uses social intuition theory to make the claim that our moral intuitions about these values guide our reasoning. This argument is missing the mark. I would argue that our intentions and reasoning are guided by our conscience. Our conscience is the foundation upon which our intentions and reasoning are driven. Our intuitions inform our reasoning, which in turn inform our intuitions, which in turn inform reasoning. These mechanisms are part of the learning process, yet the process is driven by our conscience. When we align our intuitions and reasoning to our conscience, our very nature is closer in alignment with our Maker. Our Maker is the source of our conscience and the reason why we have a conscience. We are made in His image, which is why one of the unique features of our species is that we have a moral code and a conscience. Some might argue that our intuitions are our conscience, but the two are distinct. Imagine yourself on the edge of a pond. You witness an alligator that grabs a little boy and drags him into the pond. Your intuitions are to protect yourself, to stay alive for your family. You feel the strong intuitions to run and save yourself from the alligator. Fight or flight. You've been hardwired to run away. Your intuitions are in full survival mode. Yet your conscience calls on you to rescue the little boy. Your conscience is at a higher level than your intuitions, similar to Maslow's self-actualization mode. Your conscience calls on you to risk your life to save the life of another. My idea is not new. Consider Christian synderesis. Zolo, Pellegrini, and Ciappi in 2017 identified the importance of bridging the gap between intuitive and emotional processes, or moral intuitions, with conscious and rational processes, or moral reasoning, to explain ethical decision-making. They related moral intuitions to Kantian universalism and moral reasoning to utilitarian ethics. They said, despite the different sophistications of the utilitarian approach, a common element of all these theories is that the agent is rational and able to evaluate the situation and its outcome. Definitely such requisites are not met by talking about intuition, especially the ability to forecast and choose the preferable outcomes. Conversely, universalism imposes that every act is performed according to general and transcendental moral principles. And they quoted Kant. The authors used an influential Christian moral social doctrine, synderesis, to bridge the gap between the two viewpoints. Synderesis is an innate human habit that fosters moral judgment and triggers the virtue of practical reason. It is the correct habit that regulates intuition due to its innate nature, and it's present in every individual. In Summa Theologiae, Thomas Aquinas referred to synderesis as the law of our mind, which is an awareness or understanding of the principles of human action. Practical reasoning moves one from awareness of the principles to conclusions on actions or decisions. Conscience then forms a judgment on whether the actions or decisions are in alignment with one's moral nature, whether they are right or wrong. Using the popular being versus doing mode, consider that our conscience and intuitions are steeped within our nature, or being. Our reasoning, or goal setting, is steeped in actions, or doing. Accordingly, grounding our morality in our reasoning, compare that with consequentialism, utilitarianism, or the moral value itself, is flawed. It equates with establishing the goal or the value and then saying that the goal or the value is also the source or foundation of the goal or value. The argument is circular. It's a play on words. To put it another way, setting a goal is an act or doing, while the grounding is being. One cannot conflate the two. Doing focuses on the impersonal external world in the act of setting a goal or getting something done. Being focuses on what's internal and personal to us, intrinsic to our very nature. And speaking of nature, at this point in the argument, people who support the notion of unguided evolution would likely assert that our social development and heritable traits explain our objective moral values and duties to do what's right. Yet even psychologists such as Jonathan Haidt and Steven Pinker acknowledge the category error. Haidt stated explicitly that his book was never meant to be prescriptive. It is only descriptive. Descriptive can only explain what is, while prescriptive explains what should be. Science does not have an explanation for why we know we should follow the golden rule. Science does not have an explanation for our origins either. It cannot explain why we all seek meaning and purpose in our lives. It cannot speak to why we feel compelled to do other behaviors that might jeopardize our survival, such as risk one's life to rescue another. The Bible answers those questions. Thank God. That brings me to a quote from a very famous person, Gamaliel. Gamaliel was a teacher of the law. He was a Pharisee in the Sanhedrin, And when they had arrested Peter and another apostle, here's what was stated. Gamaliel, a teacher of the law, stood up in the Sanhedrin. Men of Israel, consider carefully what you intend to do to these men. Some time ago, Theudas appeared, claiming to be somebody, and about 400 men rallied to him. He was killed, all his followers dispersed, and it all came to nothing. After him, Judas. Therefore, in the present case, I advise you, leave these men alone. Let them go. For if their purpose or activity is of human origin, it will fail. But if it is from God, you will not be able to stop these men. You will only find yourselves fighting against God. By 313, when Christianity was finally legalized, after several hundred brutal years where Christians were every so often picked up and brutalized, sometimes they were crucified, sometimes they were beheaded, many were stoned, many other sorts of things happened to them. It's been recorded extra biblically. It's pretty awful stuff, this Christian persecution. But despite all of that, between 5 and 6 million people were following Jesus Christ when Constantine finally offered Christians legal protections. And on that note, I will let you go. Please like, subscribe, come again, and share with your friends. Bye-bye.